drinking. Put the drinks on the table. I hope you buy it. Me and the boys come to give you a parang. We ain't even till the liquor done. Oh yo yo yeah yeah yeah. Come on fellas, let me take a next one. Oh yo yo yeah yeah yeah. We have about 10 homes to clean. Oh yo yo yeah yeah yeah. We drinking from pain to kerosene. Oh yo yo yeah yeah yeah. It's Christmas. Merry Christmas. It's Christmas. Merry Christmas. Hey. Last year we went by Valley Ram. He placed Matt and Heidi Ham. Bring one bottle of baba. The thing finished with one lash. Had to leave the man house quick. He said the wife was feeling sick. That same night she was liming in the quizzy. Well, if he think that he gets away. Oh yo yo yeah yeah yeah. We go in by he and spend the whole day. Oh yo yo yeah yeah yeah. We eating and drink everything he bring. Oh yo yo yeah yeah yeah. When we leave there he mustn't have a thing. Oh yo yo yeah yeah yeah. It's Christmas. Merry Christmas. It's Christmas. Merry Christmas. Oh yeah. Get it. It's Christmas.
Christmas time. Let me go now, man. Here we go. The man me buy Christmas morning, and me and me boys we parang, yeah. Celebrate, celebrate. It's the birth of Christ the King, the one who came to die for our sins. Celebrate, celebrate. Listen what we do now. We drinking. Never is Christmas morning. Serenaded. Never is Christmas morning. Carols singing. Never is Christmas morning. Love is spreading. Never is Christmas morning. Never come the man, never come the man. What for you sticking inside of it? Why you hiding the kick for? Bring it come, bring it come. Celebrate, celebrate. Sorry, and gingerbread. Cake and ham and wine is what we share. Celebrate, celebration time. Celebrate. We drinking. Never is Christmas morning. Serenading. Never is Christmas morning. Carols singing. Never is Christmas morning. Love is spreading. Never is Christmas morning. Wapen man. Celebrate rum candle.
Yes, indeed, of course, a pleasant good night to all and sundry, East, West, North, South, Central. Our friends in Tobago and wherever you are, streaming on the World Wide Web, a pleasant good day to you. It feels to me as if it's almost a whole year that we have been separated. I'm talking about, of course, the fact that we didn't have, of course, a corridor transformation on Thursday last, but it was for good cause. And the cause was that Andy Williams, one of our very own, was being screened for, of course, the Toko Sangre Grande seat with the UNC, of course. There can be no other. And as a consequence of that, both Mikey and I decided, of course, we must lend our support, apart from the several other persons who, of course, journeyed from Sangre Grande and environs, including Toko, in order, of course, to give support to Andy's candidacy. We don't know yet who are the chosen ones, but I want to tell you it was from a very, what I consider to be illustrious group, including Andy, of course. But so we will see what has transpired there. But that's the reason why we didn't have, of course, a corridor on Thursday. However, of course, on Friday, I decided that I must, of course, after a long sabbatical, to, of course, engage in my favorite, what I consider to be pastime on a Friday. So I was at Spargos, yes, and boy, I had a good time. But of course, we have to get back to reality, and the reality is that, of course, there are a number of issues that we must, of course, embrace. We must, of course, not just engage, not just extrapolate, but to, of course, give the truth and nothing but the truth. Yes, indeed.
September, check it back on your finger. You see, you're conceiving December.
What we gonna do right here is go back, way back into time. Who that?
Of course, we have the telephone lines open. Of course, the 337-6940. It is streaming across the screen at this time. And also, let me tell you that, of course, we are very appreciative. In fact, this evening, I collected, of course, from several persons, I think about 3 or 4 of them, different parts of the country, as far as, of course, Cuba, Pisal to be exact, as well as Shogunas, as well as, of course, other parts of the central region. And indeed, as far back, let's say back to Port of Spain, Barataria, 2 instances where, of course, we were called upon to, of course, indicate, as people indicated, that they are willing to assist, of course, in the Shouta Baptist Learning Institute effort. I want to say, of course, to corporate citizens, in particular, we will be making a special plea to you between Monday and the Tuesday, Christmas Eve, because this is one Christmas Eve, or should I say Christmas Day, we may not be able, of course, to deliver as we normally would do, and that is a very special time for me, and I take pride, of course, in delivering Christmas cheers and greetings, and of course, to ameliorate certain circumstances, because there are people who simply, as we have experienced in the past, say that they didn't know what they're going to cook for Christmas. But because of the delivery that we made on Christmas morning, my colleagues and myself, and I make it a particular, should I say, action, a particular duty to be there on Christmas morning to, of course, deliver hampers and toys, etc. So, corporate citizens, those of you who said Monday, those of you who said even Tuesday, we will be, of course, calling upon you. We will collect and we will deliver, even if it's Christmas morning. I don't want to say yet, except on Christmas night, that we are going to continue in the new year, but I want to, of course, try to at least get as much support for Christmas Day. And we have, of course, just about 3 more days tomorrow, Monday and Tuesday. Yes, indeed.
Follow me. Now look at your West.
Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley and other members of Parliament joined members of staff of the Ministry of Education in paying tribute to the life of one of their own, Minister in the Ministry of Education, Lisa Morris-Julian.
At 7 o'clock in the morning, my wife comes through the door and she asked me, "Did you hear?" I said, "Hear what?" And she said that Lisa has died and 2 of her children died with her. have not yet got over the sound of that news. I stayed up for the rest of the morning and I went to bed at 10 o'clock with that thought still not real. I slept until 12 o'clock and I woke up to discover that I was covered in tears. I slept until 12 o'clock and I woke up to discover that I was covered in tears. To discover that I was covered in tears.
People, let us be real now. I want you to listen to Dr. Rowley's eulogy at a commemoratory devotion to, of course, the late Morris-Julian on the occasion of her passing tragically. Listen to Rowley again, and I want you to pay attention to the timing. The time that he said that he, of course, heard the news, when he went back to bed, and the time he got up. Because it is crucial. It's crucial. Because I want to tell you that with Rowley, when he tells you stand up, you run. When he tells you close your eyes, you open it wide. That is the nature of the beast. And it has nothing to do, of course, with reduced sympathy for and the empathy, if you want to call it that, or the tragic nature of the circumstance. But I want you, of course, to listen to Keith Christopher Rowley, clearly a lame duck prime minister, who within his party and outside his party is extremely unpopular. And if this is how he believes he can salvage his own circumstance, then I think that the gods are against him. Because it is the Greek that says when the gods are against you, and I put it in my own way, wet toilet paper has cut you. In other words, who the gods wish to destroy, they first send them mad. So he has gone mad. Listen to this again.
Follow me. Now look at the west.
Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley and other members of Parliament joined members of staff of the Ministry of Education in paying tribute to the life of one of their own, Minister in the Ministry of Education, Lisa Morris-Julian.
At 7 o'clock in the morning, my wife comes through the door and she asked me, "Did you hear?" I said, "Hear what?" And she said that Lisa has died and 2 of her children died with her. I have not yet got over the sound of that news. I stayed up for the rest of the morning and I went to bed at 10 o'clock with that thought still not real. I slept until 12 o'clock and I woke up to discover that I was covered in tears. I slept until 12 o'clock and I woke up to discover that I was covered in tears. To discover that I was covered in tears.
Let us examine that statement critically. He got the news at 7 o'clock in the morning. That Monday morning. Don't forget, of course, that the ground report would have been on air from 6 o'clock, 1 hour before he got that news. According to what he said in that eulogy, in that recognition. And then, of course, having gotten the news from his wife, he went back to bed around 10 o'clock. And when he got up at 12 o'clock, he claimed to have been covered in tears. So he was dreaming about the situation and the tragedy of this woman, so much so that even in his sleep, he was crying. That's the logical conclusion, people. And then and of course, that is when he got up and recognized that at 12 o'clock. The difficulty with that fundamentally is, people, that whilst we were on the ground report, and we would have, of course, concluded concluded that program at 10 o'clock, having started, of course, at 6 o'clock. Having started at 6 o'clock. And while we were, of course, nearing the end of the program, maybe about 45 minutes to about an hour, so all around 9 o'clock, we were showing pictures, or we were viewing pictures of Dr. Rowley arriving at the scene in Arima, and of course talking to various ministers and officials of the PNM, whether it be Camille Robinson-Regis, whether it be, of course, Penelope Beckles, or whether it was, of course, Cummins, who doesn't know if he's going or coming, but he was there as well. And we even saw him, of course, attempting to get some kind of audience with, of course, the ministers who were there. And he, of course, moved closer out of the gaze, or put another way, out of the close proximity of those who would have gathered in order to witness that occasion. What does this mean? It means that it is impossible for Rowley to have gone back to sleep at 10 o'clock and get up at 12 o'clock in 12 o'clock midday. That is what that says. But when we examine, we wanted to know, why would he say such a thing? And omitted, of course, the chronology, the sequence of events, and of course the application of the time. And that you cannot, of course, avoid the inescapable conclusion that the reason for him, as we had indicated, that it will not be far-fetched or beyond Rowley to capitalize on that occasion. So, of course, in that eulogy, I'm going to play it, of course, probably another time, but I have it there. When he was so hurried to say that Morris-Julian, the late, is his best minister. Best minister. Nobody would have thought so. Not so. In the public gaze and in the public understanding, you would have, of course, given that accolade to, of course, Stuart Young, having regard to the fact that, of course, he gave him the opportunity to serve as Prime Minister in his absence. Maybe, of course, another contender would have been, of course, Imsbert. And, of course, you wouldn't put her in front of Penelope Beckles or, of course, Camille Robinson-Regis. But yet still, probably said that at that occasion. So it tells me, in his haste, in his efforts, of course, to give the punchline that she was his best minister, he was totally confused with respect to the timing and the fact that he could not have been two places at the same time. Unless he's telling us that he could be two places at the same time. Because if it is that we, on the ground report, on that fateful Monday morning, and of course the incident took place an hour before, about 5 o'clock, and we saw Rowley at the scene of the incident around 9 o'clock, how the hell he could have been told, according to him, listen to him again, that he was told of it by his wife at 7 o'clock. He went back to sleep at 10 o'clock. She wake him up and went back to sleep at 10 and got back up at 12. But we saw him at the scene. And don't tell me I know what I'm talking about before I show you that too, you know. at around 9 o'clock. He was at the scene. Was he in bed and dreaming and of course actually transpose himself to the scene while he's dreaming? And then of course the phantasmagorical other part of the story is that he got up and found himself bathing in tears. What an exaggeration. What an unreal event. Whether it be physics, or whether it be some mathematical equation, whether it is, of course, disaligned with the cosmos, the fact of the matter is that it is impossible for him to be two places at the same time and making that kind of statement that he did. We saw him at around 9 o'clock when the program was on, because we were monitoring the entire thing, because we and all on the ground report couldn't believe that occurred. And I'll tell you why, but let's go back there again to hear Dr. Rowley and his account and the scenario or the timeline that he has preferred to the audience.
Follow me, I'll give you rest.
Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley and other members of Parliament joined members of staff of the Ministry of Education in paying tribute to the life of one of their own, Minister in the Ministry of Education, Lisa Morris-Julian.
At 7 o'clock in the morning, my wife comes through the door and she asked me, "Did you hear?" I said, "Hear what?" And she said that Lisa has died and two of her children died with her. I have not yet got over the sound of that news. I stayed up for the rest of the morning and I went to bed at 10 o'clock with that thought still not real. I slept until 12 o'clock and I woke up to discover that I was covered in tears. I slept until 12 o'clock and I woke up to discover that I was covered in tears.
Yes, people, I know you can't believe your ears, based, of course, on the circumstances that I referred to. And I was totally illogical. It was totally impossible for that series of events to have occurred, the way how Rowley said, in his personal experience, having heard, of course, the news about Lisa Morris-Julian's death. And as I said, do not be surprised, I said that to the population then. Do not be surprised Rowley capitalizing on that. And as I said, his punchline was in that whole scenario that she was his best minister. And by any stretch of the imagination, and anybody who, of course, who has a modicum, a base knowledge of the category or the status in relation to Rowley of his ministers, she would have been, of course, clearly an outsider, one who would have been least considered to be, of course, his favorite minister. And favorite here, of course, we have to define it. I assume favorite means most efficient, high degree of delivery. Because you can even put, of course, the narcoleptic and the indolent, or should I say lazy, Hines in front of her. Having regard, of course, to the fact that she did not get a full ministry, but Hines got one. How the hell she becomes, of course, his most prized minister. She was a minister in the Ministry of Education with specific responsibility. And she was not, of course, the chosen one. It was, of course, Dolly. How come? Capitalizing on, of course, the debt, a total and absolute, as we have said, political kobo. Eating away on the carcass of a situation in which, of course, Lisa Morris-Julian found herself with her 2 children. I am not being harsh, no, but I'm being pragmatic and real. Because Dr. Rowley seemed to tell us that he was so traumatized, he was so concerned that he bathed himself in tears, the man said, and then proceeded to give us an incongruent, an illogical, and non-common sense diatribe about the chronology of his experience when he would have heard about the deaths. 7 o'clock in the morning, went from his wife, went back to sleep at 10, and got back up 12. But yet still, around 9 o'clock, he was at the scene of the incident. Why am I particularly concerned about that? Because when I first heard of the incident, I was in disbelief. But as reality engulfed not just me, but all who would have been paying attention, I began to ponder and to ideate. And then, like a typical mathematician, with, of course, a sense of precision, because mathematics is not like social science. There's always, just as chemistry, just as maybe physics, there's always cause and effect. And the cause is to be specific, and the effect are also to be specific once you can observe the totality of the particular issue that you are examining in these sciences, whether it be physics, whether it be chemistry, or whether it be mathematics. It has a penchant, it has a proclivity, it has a tendency to be specific. Water boils at a particular temperature. Yeah. Two different elements react to each other in a particular recorded and constant way, as opposed, of course, to sociology, where two human beings faced with the same situation, they may well, of course, have divergent positions on the same thing. In other words, I could ask the two persons, what's the best way to get to Port of Spain from the south? And the most efficient way to get to Port of Spain from coming from San Fernando or Chaguanas, when you hit, of course, the highway, just about around Solo, thereabout, where Solo is, Churchill Roosevelt Highway. And guess what? One person may say, and they will be right, that you go down the Beetham Highway. And next one may say, look, you go over the Lady Young. Two different, of course, answers, but of course, both of them would have been right. Sociology. But of course, chemistry, you know that water boils at a particular temperature, and that is it, no matter what you do. Why am I saying that? I'm saying that from the perspective that I asked the question, what is the possibility that from 1.5 million people, and with only 41 persons that could be members of parliament, because there's only 41 seats that people, of course, contest for in the present circumstance of getting into office or getting a parliamentary seat. 41. But worse yet, apart from that, from that scenario, what is the possibility that a fire of that nature will be caused in Arima and target, of course, the house of the parliamentary representative for Omira? But worse yet, what's the possibility that 5 of her members of her family will escape, and she, of course, would not escape and died with 2 of her children? It gets worse. What is the possibility? I'm adding, of course, to all of that. What is the possibility that she, being in all of the above, the fire tender that was a stone's throw away could not respond because it was attending to an industrial fire at the same time? It gets worse. What is the possibility for all of that to happen? When did the available other fire station in Tonopuna, obviously it will arrive later, but there was also a further impediment to arriving later, yes, than if it was the Arima tender, fire tender. But it too was attending at the same time to a domestic fire. Wow. What is the possibility of that happening? All of those circumstances coming together to ensure that, of course, the worst occurred in that particular scenario. We ain't talked yet about how it is that they got trapped inside of there. Maybe they couldn't find the keys for the burglar proof, etc., etc. But that is speculation. I'm talking about what we know. That is a possibility. I have always started out by saying I do not believe in superstition. I've started out by saying, of course, voodoo and obia and so on is an abstract construct of the human being or the human brain or psyche. But you tell me how all of these things could come together on one moment, one day, when, of course, this woman needed, of course, the assistance, and none of these things functioned? None of these things functioned? Of 1.5 million people, let's go it over, 1.5 million people, only 41 members of parliament. One member, where she lives in Arima, her house targeted, catch a fire. She's in there. The 5 escaped, even though, of course, her husband probably still in hospital, but he got severe burns, but he escaped as well. She didn't escape with 2 of her children. the stone's throw away fire tender was out on an industrial matter, solving a particular fire. And then the one that was closest into the Puna was also engaged in a domestic fire. But worse yet, when it eventually came together and the fire tenders were there, no water of sufficient pressure to out the fire. I want you to tell me what you think. What you think. You see, there are those who say that the Lord moves in mysterious ways his wonders to perform. But I gave you how Rowley misrepresented his own experience as to when he heard it and how, not how he responded, but when he heard it, talking about bathing in tears, and of course the timing clearly out of sync. And you have, of course, about 6 or 7 circumstances not coming together. One alone would have solved the problem if she had found the keys, if the fire tenders were present from Arima quickly. And even when, of course, that there was a bucket brigade, the water seemed to be sparse. What is the possibility, people, of that, all of those things coming together to create the death, the harrowing death of this woman and her 2 children? We must, as human beings, be concerned. Is there something in the cosmos that has created such a devastating multiple situation to prevent her from continuing her life? What? Yeah, in the aftermath, there will be all kinds of talk, and people will not, of course, take responsibility. We have seen, of course, the Minister for Public Utilities, and therefore WASA, talk a similar piece of what I consider to be hogwash. I say hogwash in the context, not being insensitive to the death, but being deeply concerned as to the utterances of those who should be honest in such a situation. So Gonzalez is on record. I don't get me vexed before I play it too, you know. Gonzalez is on record, the Minister of Public Utilities, that the water system, including, of course, the dam, were alerted around 4 o'clock. But the fire started around 5. So an hour in advance, Gonzalez. And of course, in his vain attempt, of course, and his puerile and certainly convoluted and meandering, totally disjointed, and of course, asinine statement talked about the other mechanisms for the provision of water to the scene were triggered. However, the fire service remained resolute that providing a domestic supply of water is not equated to what should be in those fire hydrants to provide the force and the amount, but they call it by the liter, to have, of course, a proper service as far as the tender is concerned, utilizing its pump, its onboard pump, and to, of course, treat with the fire. Yes, people. All these are questions. All these are things that were told. So the Minister of National Security cannot come and tell us that he's awaiting the report, and it is simple as that, and therefore we accept what it is. No, that come like, of course, Rowley telling us three, and then of course 2 point something billion dollars are missing or cannot be accounted for by the Minister of Finance, and telling us that we must accept what the Minister of Finance say or the government say on the matter, not the Auditor General, the person who of course had to do the job to inspect and to evaluate and to of course report. So it is consistent with what we have been saying, that when Rowley tell you to jump, you stand up still, and when he tell you to open your eyes, you close it shut. That doesn't make sense. It is clear that the intention, of course, is try, of course, to salvage some kind of dignity, some kind of amorphous efficaciousness that simply cannot be contemplated or addressed in that or in those circumstances. Conclusion: Rowley must call the election now. But he wouldn't. He will try to go until September or August, as the case may be, when constitutionally next year I'm talking about, that he has to call it. No doubt there are, of course, internal within the PNM forces that are telling him, you're doing nonsense, you're doing shit, you are a political kobo, you are picking, of course, on the carcass. Of course, I expect, will respond by saying, listen, no, I am the man who, of course, led all you for the last 9 years. And he want them, of course, to forget, to not contemplate on the fact as to the quality of that leadership. Poor, deceptive, evil. As he started, of course, with a bogus piece of paper that he says was emails. And every single opportunity to, of course, respectfully and honestly say that we were wrong, whether it be, of course, the highway to Point Fortin, whether it be Sandals, whether it be the sea bridge between Trinidad and Tobago and the decimation of the economy of Tobago, whether it be the decision, of course, to close down Petrotrin, whether it be the decision, of course, to do what? To try to make us believe that he had nothing to do, but eventually he had to say yes, he had something to do with it. I'm talking about, of course, the decision for his intervention as far as the Police Service Commission is concerned, and the possibility, the historic possibility that a sitting president, Paula May Weeks, might have been impeached if he didn't come and set the record straight by saying it was him. Of course, the result of that was, of course, the total resignation of the entire commission, the Police Service Commission. I ain't finished yet. Whether it be, of course, the whole question of Brent Thomas and the courts are saying, concluding that, of course, he was kidnapped, and, of course, the use of CARICOM assets in order to bring him back from Barbados, and the Barbadian government has already, of course, admitted that it was wrong and literally gave an open check to Mr. Brent Thomas in terms of compensating him for what they did, because they ought to have, of course, engaged in extradition proceedings and not in, of course, handing him over to, of course, Trinidad and Tobago police officers that went there, and none of the government officials who ought to have signed off on it, particularly the minister, has remained silent on the matter and not told us as yet that it is they who, of course, ordered that kind of what I consider to be barbaric, illegal, and high-handed conduct. I ain't finished yet. Whether it is, of course, the Vincent Nelson matter, when Rowley was up and down the country, saying, of course, we get a big fish, and then Ram Logan and Ramdean. And he was saying to us in that period, before, of course, the honorable, honest, and distinguished leader of the opposition and head of the UNC, Kamala Prasad Bisesa, made her intervention and told us the truth. He was up and down, he Rowley up and down the country, saying that Pamasa, you can remember Pamasa, and of course he went as state witness, and as a consequence of people were hanged, including of course Abdul Malik. Well, of course he is lightening that situation with respect, of course, to Vincent Nelson, being, of course, a witness against Anand Ramlogan and Ramdean. He was up and down the place. You see, I want to tell you, and I want to show you pattern of behavior. It is called modus operandi in, of course, criminal investigative terms, criminology. He, Rowley, told us that Pamasa was a state witness. And so Abdul Malik was, of course, hanged as a consequence of Pamasa's witness because, of course, he Rowley misguided us, and of course presented, of course, what I consider to be an ignoramus understanding of the criminal law and how it operates in such circumstance. Because remember, Ramdean and Anand Ramlogan were charged with, of course, misbehavior in public office and, of course, taking kickbacks and therefore corruption. Criminal charge under the Integrity in Public Life Act and a number of other pieces of criminal legislation. You see, what he did not tell us, or maybe in his enthusiasm, just as how, of course, he talked about the best minister that he would have had, and want, of course, to reach there, that, of course, he missed totally the period when he got the information, and when, of course, he went back to sleep and got back up again, all, of course, covered in tears. Very important, people. You see, in the criminal law, a person who, of course, is turning state witness must not only be part and parcel of the act itself in such circumstances, such as Pramasa, because he was there, and therefore, of course, he would have been embroiled in the whole killing of that woman in Arima. But he would, of course, turn state witness because he didn't want to be prosecuted. But in the case, of course, of Vincent Nelson, Rowley is saying that you could give a man $10 million, and likely, of course, that $10 million offer or given to, of course, a criminal matter such as Pramasa. I say, hold your tail, Rowley. You are an ass. You are an asinine specimen of inhumanity. You're wicked, you're dunderheaded, you're dotish, and of course, irrelevant. That don't happen in a criminal matter. You don't pay people to be witness. And that is what Rowley and they did. But Rowley was up and down the place, indicating that, listen, they catch a big fish. And that, of course, the significance of the witness is, of course, he's a Queen's Counsel. And what we know now is that that Queen's Counsel compromised his own integrity with a group of persons, not for the first time, that will extract the advantage that they want to pursue their own selfish, nefarious, and usually against the public's interests, and therefore abuse taxpayers' money. you and I, because they are a criminal enterprise under the PNM of a mafia nature. He omitted to tell us about the $10 million. When, of course, the honorable leader of the opposition then, of course, disclosed with her other members and team, there's a different light altogether. So much so that the DPP said, but this is nonsense, this is shit. And, of course, withdraw the charges that triggered a humiliation for both Ramdeen and, of course, Anand Ram Logan. But I know that, of course, ultimately they will have a good payday. For sure, Rowley didn't care about that. He wanted, of course, to show you that the figment of his very pernicious and evil and very, what I consider to be, fertile imagination, only for evil and wickedness, it was truth, and therefore he wanted to manifest it so much that he concocted once again, just as the emails, another scenario to try, of course, to reduce, downgrade, humiliate, destroy his political opponent. I say opponent, and I'm talking here specifically about the UNC. Because we have already shown where all of what Rowley was saying about the UNC is totally false and, of course, a figment of his evil imagination. And now that, of course, he is Prime Minister, he cannot, of course, approve one thing with respect, of course, to a major criminal action, whether it be, of course, on the question of the velodrome in Couva, the cycling velodrome, or the aquatic center, or the children's hospital, or the 107 schools that they either constructed or were in different stages of construction and or completion. Watch it out. Watch it. But every single major project that he undertake, Rowley, over the last 9 years, we have seen, of course, there are palpable and tactile proof, irrefutable, that either overruns too much money and therefore, of course, kickbacks. And you only have to watch it, of course, Balize House, and know that that is in fact so. There is no need to speculate. There's in fact so, because he cannot tell us where they get the money from in order to build that what I consider to be monstrosity of steel, iron, mortar, brick. Cannot. And he will go, of course, in the public face and say that members of his government contributed and that he hold raffle. Well, I have to ask the question as you must ask as well. In order for, of course, raffle to contribute to that, over 100 million and counting, I ain't talk yet about furnishing it, and completing it, electricity. They must, of course, wire the place. They must, of course, inaugurate a elevator, etc., because it's 5 stories tall with a car park in the basement. How come? How come? Is it that you ask the National Lottery Board to suspend any of his activities for about 6 months in order for you to get enough raffle ticket sale to build that? And that did not happen. More than that, you said that of course, that the PNM was owing over $5 million when you got into office in 2015. But in, of course, less than 9 years, you are able, of course, to find over $100 million and counting in order, of course, to build that monstrosity called Balize House. I want to tell you, just in case, of course, you have doubt, that Eric Williams spent more time in the office of Prime Minister than Rowley. Rowley only spent 2 terms. Eric Williams said multiple terms and couldn't build a Balize house in the way that Rowley is doing. You know what I say? I say Eric Williams, the founding father of the party that always had a Balize house. It remained, of course, a humdrum or a mangle of antiquated presence, and of course its structural integrity one could question as well, but they didn't find the money to reconstruct. But Rowley is saying that Eric Williams say that of course he found a document that Eric Williams say we should rebuild the Balize house, even if that was an intent, and he of course is the one that will have the legacy of having constructed it, but of course he cannot account for where he got over $100 million. And don't tell me you don't know where he get it from. It's there. Because you see, one of the crucial points that he raised, and even though, of course, he was claiming that members of the party who got, of course, public office contribute and so on, and of course, the raffle, etc., we know that is hogwash, we know that is dark tribe, we know that is a figment of his very pernicious imagination, and we know that is as a result, of course, thief, blood money. Blood money. We know. That no way it would have been impossible, just as how it was impossible given his chronology of how he learned about Lisa Morris-Julian's death in that fire, tragic as it was. It has become stereotypical of Rowley to lie and lie and lie, and of course in circumstances that defies logic, common sense, and rationality. Let us not waste time. And so it is important that we understand. People, I don't have my phone on me. I know that people are calling, but they left the phone in the car. I omitted, of course, to walk with it. I don't know if some people are calling because I'm only getting it now after fix, of course, the system itself, where I can get it on the screen that I work with on a daily basis. But let's hope that it will be a better situation tomorrow. So I know that people are calling, but I have no way of verifying. But I don't mind, because it's important to what I am saying tonight, of course, to resonate and to, of course, be assimilated and be, of course, understood. We started, of course, with how is it possible that all these different things went against the circumstances that would have prevented the death of Lisa Morris-Julian and her two children could have gone so awry. What was aligning, or what was dysfunctional, or what was malaligned? Because you know that in many instances, facing danger, you may be in an accident, and something in the circumstances of the accident prevented you from dying. Maybe the car or the other vehicle swerved off the road, and so you were able, of course, to get a free pass, so to speak. So there was no collision. Something happens. But usually it's maybe one or two circumstances, but not about 6 different things that ought to have been functioning to save the life of this woman and her children that never functioned. I want you to be the judge. I have my own position on it. I will talk about it tomorrow night. But I want you, of course, to ideate, meditate. Is there an evil force that was playing in the background? Was it a reflection of evil in high places that Trinidad and Tobago has become known for? What? So of course we included of course Vincent Nelson, but there's more. There's more. Because it was Rowley who told us that the Dragon deal would be a manifestation years ago. Years ago. It was Rowley who told us that he wasn't closing down Petrotrin. Today, we have a situation where we cannot get $25 US. It was Rowley who told us that the government was going out of the oil refining industry or business. But today, they are fighting tooth and nail to get, of course, a buyer or operator for the oil refinery, and to no avail. Whether it be Jindal as the latest or otherwise. And even in those circumstances, it was, of course, misinformation, disinformation. And don't tell me you don't know about Jindal, you know. That Rowley, of course, invited to the diplomatic center and, of course, promoting him as the man who may want to restart the oil refinery with, of course, Venezuelan oil. Don't forget that. But, of course, it was in circumstances where the offer for expressions of interest was concluded. It came to the end, and yet still post or after that, Rowley still had Jindal in his own. This man is totally disrespectful of the rule of law and fundamental principles of right and wrong. You'll understand why there is the talk about spiritual wickedness in high places. You'll understand that. Understand that. Spiritual wickedness in high places. That is real. I ain't finished yet. And the mothballed, like of course the oil refinery, which of course Ibsbert came back and said that it was a net earner of foreign exchange. In other words, whether it was, of course, importing 100,000 barrels a day for its viability, the oil refinery was still making a US dollar profit. Ibsbert come back and say that. Well, train 1 of the nitrogen plant, they spend over 200 million on it to maintain it, to keep it in a ready state, in circumstances where the upstreamers, whether it be BP, whether it be, of course, the other gas producers who drill and monetize the gas, they say they're not supplying that particular tranche or that particular nitrogen plant with any gas. Rowley and them knew that, but they still invest it. And I want to tell you, do not forget that the man who was at the helm of NGC, which of course put out the money, was suddenly taken out from NGC and sent, of course, to Suriname. I'm talking about Emil. Yes, Ken Julian's son, Emil, a former minister in the Manning administration, in the same area of course, energy. Same. But of course, nothing different to when, of course, the mark bust about the fake oil in, of course, Petrotrin, and the head of that company at the time, the chairman, suddenly resigned. Because the intention is to protect them from questions that they ought to answer. So Enel Gonzo and that one decide to resign. The next thing we know is that, of course, there was fake oil, and of course Rowley said that his friend is AV Drilling, the man, of course, at the center, and his company. And then, of course, Rowley put, of course, his lawyer talk about Michael Kwamina to be head of the company that is supposed to deal with these outstanding matters, including, of course, the arbitration that went phantasmagorically or inexplicably AV Drillin's way. And they got another contract, and they got, of course, the difference, or got money for, of course, as part of the fake oil imbroglio. Fake oil imbroglio. They got money. I say so from the point of view that let's assume that that was Kamala Prasad Bisesa, because we saw where, of course, SS, a company that Rowley and them say is associated, of course, with the UNC, with respect, of course, to that wastewater cleansing project, in order, of course, to send that to Point Lisas, the wastewater treatment plant, to send it to Point, the result of which is to send it to Point Lisas, so that it can be used for industrial purposes. Whilst, of course, any other water that is coming from Wassa to that place could now be sent to you and I on the, of course, domestic grill, or should I say grid. Yeah. That is thinking on the part of Kamala and they. But Rowley said there is an incestuous relationship because, of course, while, of course, SS was the executor of the project, and he is saying associated with the UNC administration and therefore a financer or something of that nature. The fact is that Wassa got the money from NGC, as far as Rowley is concerned, is a toxic brew and some kind of corruption. Not that we will get more water, not for domestic use, not that Point Lisas will have a separate supply of water that psychologically will not affect the ordinary consumer, because it, of course, it is for industrial purposes, to cool whatever, and to, of course, utilize in the manufacturing of whatever it is, whether it's fertilizer, whether, of course, it be any other product that, of course, is produced at Point Lisas. No. Today, if SS was allowed to continue with that wastewater treatment plant initiative, Gonzalez and Rowley wouldn't be playing the fool all over the place, saying that the drilling wells here, drilling wells there, and of course I have a Canadian model that they want to use all over the place, and claiming, of course, that there is, of course, 75 or 90% water supply. And then, of course, when that particular incident took place in Arima, there was no water to, of course, douse or out the flames. Let us not waste time with these people. It's plenty talk. So they spent over 200 million at train 1 of that nitrogen plant. We don't know, and there is no benefit to be had, except we know that we can connect that particular expenditure with, of course, the elections of 2020. That's the best we can do. Connect it to the elections of 2020 for the PNM, and even those circumstances, they had to steal the blasted election because, of course, we know they were further reduced from 23 seats to 22 seats as they have now. And, of course, by that fire recently, they have been reduced further to 21 seats because Julian was, of course, the representative for Dabadi O'Meara. Let us not waste time. Something is in the cosmos. Something is saying that Rowley and they not only have they come to the zenith or the end of the people's tolerance, but something that is much more powerful than all of us is now operating against Rowley and they, and therefore they have come, of course, to the end of their shenanigans, their mismanagement, their disrespect, their incompetence, the evil agenda, mismanagement of the resources of the country, and the blatant and unadulterated and conspicuous larceny, stealing of the country's resources. Yes, the PNM under Rowley could be considered to be a kleptocratic government by thieves. And of course, as one caller aptly put it, a catastrophe. I should say a catastrophe. Well, I say it is a catastrophe. Of course, catastrophe meaning, of course, that there is a government that is least qualified to manage the affairs of the country, and Rowley and his a bunch of nincompoops are so qualified. Kakistocracy. Government by people who are least qualified to manage the affairs of the country. Quite apart from being a kleptocracy, government by thieves. But all of that is a catastrophe. Catastrophe. As of course the PNM itself is now imploding and of course exploding onto the national psyche and the national operational dynamics, to make Trinidad and Tobago a candidate for not just a banana republic, but a failed state if we continue with this bunch of incompetence. Let us not waste time. But it doesn't end there. It doesn't end there. We have, of course, the matter with respect to the highway to Point Fortin, where Trinidad and Tobago, Rowley, they won't tell you, but it will come to fruition soon, where we have to pay back to OS over $1 billion and all of the expenses that they would have incurred in order to take, of course, the government of Trinidad and Tobago to arbitration in London. And there's only a delay with respect, of course, to the local input in terms of the judiciary making pronouncements. That is irrelevant. That is ocious. The players involved, the government of Trinidad and Tobago, whether it be a former prime minister or the current leader of the opposition when she was prime minister. So whether it was Patrick Manning government or whether it was Kamala Prasad government, the fact is that the arrangement, the international arrangement, is that where there is a dispute, it goes to arbitration, international arbitration based in London. That has been concluded. And they say that the Trinidad and Tobago government under Keith Christopher Rowley was wrong in that, of course, they frustrated the project and they summarily dismissed unilaterally OAS that was, of course, contracted to construct the highway to Point Fortin. Of course, Rowley will, of course, come up with all kinds of what I consider to be deflections. We know him to be a great deflector. So he will talk about members of course, OAS going to meet Warner at the time. But he wouldn't tell us that OAS was a serious contender under the Manning administration. You see, it does not serve his argument to make you believe that somehow the PNM were aloft of all of that, and that it was only a UNC configuration. He loves that. So he told us, of course, that the UNC is thieves. Tell us that they are thieves. And he will repeat that all the time. So much so that Imber tell us that, listen, the country was running on fumes. And it turned out to be a blatant, unadulterated lie. Because when they left office, I'm talking about the UNC, there was over 10 billion in reserves. US. The Heritage and Civilization Fund, over 5 billion. And in the excess liquidity in the private banks was about 5 billion as well. How does that equate to be unhealthy for an economy? Most countries of the world will want that healthy fiscal situation. Income Rowley and Day in 2015. And today, it is now about 4 billion, the reserve are talking about. And that they have fitted away about $1 billion from the Heritage and Civilization Fund. So whether they say it's back to where they bet it because of the built-in natural replenishing or augmenting by way of investment abroad, the fact of the matter is it will always be short of $1 billion, even though they are not obligated. No government is obligated to pay it back. But the fact is that we know in reality it is short by $1 billion, no matter what they say. What they say. And that is notwithstanding the fact that, of course, Rowley had repeatedly said that it is impossible from his conduct, it's impossible that, of course, any government could attempt to construct over 100 schools. And when he get the news from, of course, the man who was at the helm, talking about, of course, Dr. Tim Gopi Singh in the parliament, of course, the astute opposition leader, and clearly the next prime minister of this country, told, of course, Gopi Singh to go back into the parliament, give him a temporary appointment as senator in order to explain to, of course, the population in particular through the parliament that, of course, 107 schools was, of course, in fact, attempted and in various stages of either completion or have been completed, or, of course, Rowley and they remained silent after that. Notice that they will come back with it, but of course not they themselves. They will not do it because they know that it is well established that it was over 107 schools. So what will happen is that their minions and their, of course, spokespersons and their, what I consider to be talk show hoax, will try, of course, to regurgitate that during the critical part of the campaign. We must be careful. We must show a deaf ears to that level of what I consider to be cacophonous babblings and, of course, ambulatory nonsensicalities. Ambulatory nonsensicalities, people. We cannot afford to listen to them. We cannot afford to consider them. We cannot afford to even show what I consider to be a conditional, not even a conditional consideration for them. They must be totally wiped out. And I say to you that we are looking at, of course, relegating the PNM to the dustbin of political history, and therefore we must now focus on 39 seats in Trinidad. And, of course, in Tobago, Fali and they will pick up the rest. The next two. It's 41 in all. Let us not waste time. So I want to get back, of course, to the original position. Let us, of course, for those of you who started late, let me, of course, show you how incongruent Rowley is, and how, of course, is a man that has demonstrated that he has gone totally, not just out of control, but, of course, he is not aligned with reality. Manic depressive psychosis, they call it. A spontaneous or involuntary propensity to be at loss to reality, or put another way, totally illusionary.
Follow me, I'll look in the west.
Listen to him.
Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley and other members of Parliament joined members of staff of the Ministry of Education in paying tribute to the life of one of their own, Minister in the Ministry of Education, Lisa Morris-Julian.
At 7 o'clock in the morning, my wife comes through the door and she asked me, "Did you hear?" I said, "Hear what?"
7 o'clock in the morning.
And she said that Lisa has died and 2 of her children died with her. I have not yet got over the sound of that news. I stayed up for the rest of the morning and I went to bed at 10 o'clock with that thought still not real. I slept until 12 o'clock and I woke up to discover that I was covered in tears. I slept until 12 o'clock and I woke up to discover that I was covered in tears.
That's the madman rant. But let's go further.
She was a gem. She was easy to work with. She was easy to live with. She was a community person.
Sentimental words from Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley, who, along with other members of the government, are mourning the late Minister in the Education Ministry, Lisa Morris-Julian.
As I speak to you now, I dread the day of the funeral, when I expect that it will all hang out from all of us.
There were hardly dry eyes in the crowd of mourners, as most government ministers appeared pensive. But as Dr. Rowley recalled how he learned about Morris-Julian's death from his wife, which led to him going to sleep very late and waking up in tears, it was the revelation that she died holding on to her son that exacerbated the pain.
To think of losing her and being told that she may have been hugging her child to her chest as she passed away in the flames. Those of you who have children, it's an assignment that you would never want to have. But she heard it.
If there was one thing that defined Lisa, was her dedication to her family and to her children. She lived that way in life, and she died that way. And I don't think there's any other way that Lisa would have chosen.
Moments before the service, government ministers signed the condolence book in the rotunda of the Parliament. Among them were the Prime Minister, Education, Energy and Communications Ministers, to name a few. And they are all conscious of the fact that while they grieve, the People's National Movement must select a replacement to run as the candidate for Dabidi Omera, soon to be Malabar Mosika, as the general election looms.
Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley and other members of Parliament joined members of staff of the Ministry of Education in paying tribute to the life of one of their own, Minister in the Ministry of Education, Lisa Morris-Julian. Describing it as a tragedy no one could have anticipated, Prime Minister Rowley said he is not looking forward to the funeral as the reality of the situation becomes more real. He said the last time he saw Mrs. Morris-Julian was at a family Christmas party on Saturday.
The last time I saw Lisa, she was working her way through the crowd to leave, and she stopped and took a picture of my wife and some other people around the group, and I was never to know that was the last time I'd be seeing the best representative in the government of Trinidad and Tobago. At 7 o'clock in the morning.
I told you so. Just imagine that. Let's play that again. I know that you are shocked and you will need, of course, repetition to gather your thoughts and your composure. I know, of course, you're trying not to get angry because the emotions are clearly, they will certainly, of course, stretch from intolerance of that statement prior and, of course, the statement itself.
Describing it as a tragedy no one could have anticipated, Prime Minister Rowley said he's not looking forward to the funeral as the reality of the situation becomes more real. He said the last time he saw Mrs. Morris-Julian was at a family Christmas party on Saturday.
The last time I saw Lisa, she was working her way through the crowd to leave, and she stopped and took a picture of my wife and some other people around the group, and I was never to know that was the last time I'd be seeing the best representative in the government of Trinidad and Tobago. At 7 o'clock in the morning, I was never to know that was the last time I'd be seeing the best representative in the government of Trinidad and Tobago. I was never to know that was the last time I'd be seeing the best representative in the government of Trinidad and Tobago. My wife and some other people around the group, and I was never to know that was the last time I'd be seeing